Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, deviation from our comic book talk to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's entertainment history. You might remember a few months ago we did a great conversation with Cliff Nesteroff about the history of stand-up comedy. Well, today we present a history of variety television. Amazing stuff when you think about how variety television has been such an important part of the television industry from its inception, really bringing the appeal of Hollywood and Broadway to people's homes without having to leave and go to the theater. There's a new book that captures the point of view of people who created the language and craft of this very special kind of television, going back to the early days of Ed Sullivan and the like to the modern days of American Idol, today's late night shows, and beyond. Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television, published by Kendall Hunt. We talk with co-author Mary Beth Lieidman, and the book features 26 of the most illustrious and prominent award-winning producers and directors sharing their voices and addressing the power and influence of television as filtered through the Variety looking glass. This is an excellent book, a nice big coffee table book, and there are very recognizable names on here. People like George Schlatter, the Laugh-In producer, and Lorne Michaels of Saturday Night Live, 30 Rock, and a lot of late-night talk shows like Seth Meyers' show, and certainly the original Conan O'Brien show, and, of course, Jimmy Fallon. So really neat people. Also, people like George Stevens Jr., whose father was a great Hollywood filmmaker. Stevens Jr. also became a great filmmaker and television guy, very involved in the Kennedy Center honors, and also a lot of other great variety television. Just an amazing group of people. And Mary Beth and Steve Binder, himself a great television producer, got together, made this book. Mary Beth did a lot of the legwork, interviewing a lot of these people, including Mr. Binder. Steve Binder himself involved with the Elvis 68 comeback special, Diana Ross's Central Park concert, where it started raining in the middle of the concert and she kept performing. Really big television moments, both on network television and even cable. We talk about the innovations of YouTube and the current platforms where it's a DIY world as far as making compelling video, and you don't need a network or a cable network or whatever, or a satellite company to make compelling television today. And we discussed that, and I asked Mary Beth about some of these pioneers' thoughts on today's television landscape. It's a great book, and I'm really happy to be talking to Mary Beth about it today and sharing with you this conversation on Word Balloon. Now, Word Balloon today is brought to you by Amazon and our great relationship with Amazon.com, because I really think this is a book that if you're interested in television history, you're going to want it on your bookshelf. Great book to have, and as Mary Beth and I say, to look at the examples of some of these people's creations, which are on YouTube. I mean, going back to 50s, 60s, and 70s television, that you can find clips on YouTube and compare when the directors and producers are talking about these big moments. You can go and look up those videos and stuff. Well, to buy the book, I'd ask that if you wouldn't mind, come through the wordballoon.com portal to Amazon, and that way Word Balloon gets a little kickback. How about that? Anything you purchase on Amazon through the Word Balloon portal, we get a couple cents on the dollar. It's our way of Amazon thanking us for bringing you, the listener, to Amazon to make your purchases. Doesn't cost you anything more. They're all the same prices you'd get normally by going to Amazon.com. But instead, if you go through wordballoon.com and click on that Amazon portal, it will take you to regular Amazon, and you can do any kind of purchasing you want. So let's start our conversation now with Mary Beth Lieidman. I hope to get Steve Binder on the show as well. Mr. Binder and I had a conversation. Mary Beth's co-author, as she says, and really the spearhead of this project. And I hope to get him on because he's an amazing guy. We did record an interview, and my computer promptly had a little hiccup, and we lost the interview. And it just breaks my heart. So I'm hoping to get him back to talk about his contributions to television. But in the meantime, you can get a sense of what the book is about through Mary Beth's own excitement. But she really did a great job of corralling a lot of these men and women who are very important parts of television history, from shows like The Jay Leno Tonight Show to going back again to the 60s and 70s variety shows, and certainly today's shows as well, including the co-producer of American Idol. So these are the movers and shakers that have created the language and craft of variety television. And we talk now with author Mary Beth Lieidman about Fade Up on Word Balloon.
Mary Beth Lieidman, welcome to Word Balloon. Congratulations on a very engaging book about the history of variety television.
Well, thanks very much. It's nice to be speaking with you.
How did this project happen?
Well, it's one of these stories that it's kind of very hard to conceptualize it. Two strangers meet in the middle of a meeting, and one says to the other, I kind of would like to get to do something with you, and the other one says, well, okay, let's write a book. But that's basically what happened. What happened specifically was that Steve was the head of a panel at the Television Academy's annual seminar that they have for academics. They're incredible. They bring out 20 academics to LA every year, and we get wined and dined. And it's an amazing experience. It's so that we can learn more about television from the experts. And it's an amazing experience because there's 20 of us, and there's about 6 people on each one of the panels. And so Steve was the head of the directors panel, and somehow I got into a conversation with him. Then at the end of the week, I also got into a conversation with him, and I have this tendency to give my card to people when I finish and say, if there's anything I can ever do for you, let me know. And so I did that with Steve at the end of the conversation also, and he said, thank you very much, and we shook hands. And the next day, he writes a note to me, and trust me, I have every one of these emails that I've gotten from all of these people involved in this project. It's something like 2,000 emails at this point. But it said, hi, basically said, hi, Mary, Sharon and I, Sharon is his wife, enjoyed meeting with you, and basically, do you want to write a book? And, I thought it was spam. And I said, I have no idea who this person is, except that I met him at this conference. And so I waited a day. Never, ever close a door is my motto. And I write back and says, hi, Steve. It was really nice to meet you, too. And then the next thing I know, I said, well, what kind of book do you have in mind? And he said, well, I'd like to write a book either on Elvis Presley, because, of course, as everybody knows, he's responsible for the Elvis comeback in 1968.
Yes.
And which is, a classic show on television.
Oh, absolutely.
Then or on variety television. And I wrote back to him. I said, I loved Elvis, but boy, I sure would like to do something on variety television. And he said, sure. And I said, great. And so the next thing that happened is that we kind of put it off for a couple of months, and we arranged to meet in Las Vegas in February of 2011. And this, by the way, I had first met him in November 2010. And so in February 2011, and so my husband and I flew out to Las Vegas, and we met in Las Vegas for a weekend. And Steve and I sequestered ourselves in a room for about 8 hours, and we knocked out an agreement, and and the outline for a book on variety television. Well, the outline of the book Variety Television, it changed completely from when we originally conceptualized it. But that was what happened, and that's how the book came to be.
In what ways did it change? I mean, it's what I find interesting is you've got a set of questions, and then you basically go through all of your 26 interviewers or subjects, and you get obviously the different answers to each question.
Well, how it morphed was that, first of all, this was supposed to be a textbook, and it turned out to be much bigger than a textbook. It morphed, and that's the only way I can talk about it. It was supposed to originally be a history of variety television, and Steve gave me carte blanche to talk to 25 of his nearest and dearest friends, and he's the 26th, and he basically opened the doors for me to talk to every single one of these people, and none of them said no in the end. Not one of them said no. And what I did was I talked to my doctoral students. I teach university, and at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I had these doctoral students. I said, well, if you were doing an interview, what would make a really great interview? And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do an interview asking these people, well, tell me about your life history. Although I asked that question, and some of them went on for a long time, but that's just the bio section, very small section of the book. And then I said, well, what are the things that we're really interested in knowing? And how do we make this interesting for them, not only for us? So what I did was we came up with a set of questions, and I refined the questions. And the questions were questions that basically were curiosity questions that would look at television and look at variety television specifically in a different light. And as it turned out, none of them talked to each other during this entire process. They were terrific. All the people in the book were terrific. They all knew they were being interviewed, but I specifically asked, and we asked them not to tell each other what the questions were. And Stevie didn't know what the questions were. No one knew what the questions were except for me. And so I went in, and there's one, as you are a great interviewer, clearly, the one thing I can do is I can talk, and I can ask people questions. And so I got to sit with these people for hours on end, literally, and ask these questions. And what's in the book is about half of the material I have.
I bet. Well, Mr. Bitter said that you spent like 3 hours with each subject. Am I right?
Yeah, I spent between 2 and 3 hours with everybody, except for one.
Man.
But it was an amazing moment. I mean, it was just, to be able to talk to the primary people in any business. And this one was variety television. I love television. I've loved television since I was born. My mother used to say that it was going to rot out my mind, so instead of that, I just made it my profession.
Exactly. I had the same thing. I do a little bit of television, but mostly radio. So I understand. I grew up the same way. That's terrific. Well, the people that you got for the book, my God, really do run the gamut. From the early days of television right up to, the executive producer of American Idol, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, no, TV is magical. I mean, radio is magical and TV is magical. If only I looked as great as I sound, I would be on television all the time. But
I understand. You've got some real pioneers in the book. And I want to give. I mean, there's some obvious names like the George Schlatters and the Lord Michaels out there that have produced so much stuff. But I really do want to give the women their due that you spoke to in particular. So tell me about Ellen Brown.
When I first started the book, she was the first interview we did. And when I first talked to her, all she could say is, she says, I'm a secretary. I believe she said from New Jersey. I'm a secretary from New Jersey. And somehow I ended up in television. And the fact of the matter is that she might have been a secretary for a long time, but television was television, and she ended up in L.A., and she learned the business, and she learned it very well. She learned how her directing style is very unique. She loved television, and she was able to carve out a niche for herself with the Jay Leno show specifically, having acted as assistant director for some other shows. But Jay Leno, working with Jay Leno was her bailiwick for I think 17 years.
Wow! Yeah.
She was just a really interesting woman. She was dedicated to the show. So, again, television was an odd vehicle. And early on, there were a few women that got their foot in the door, and she was one of them. It wasn't that early either, but it was. But she worked with Jay Leno for over 17 years. It's a lot of people. I mean, I think that what you see in television in general is you see a changing in the glass ceiling. It's a different business than it was when we all started. I mean, I ended up getting my foot in the door in television by taking my first class FCC license test. And because I wanted to go into TV.
Okay.
And so I looked for a place where they needed women, and they needed women in engineering at that point. And so somebody said, "Well, go get your FCC license, and you'll be able to get your foot in the door." And so I did.
That's fantastic. That's not an easy test. I had to take the third class test back in the 70s to get my first license, 1979 in particular. So yeah, I do. I mean, first class license. That's, like you say, that qualifies you to be a full-fledged engineer.
Well, it did. Now, I mean, the whole system has changed, but for me
Yes.
at least, it got my, I had it, and therefore I got my foot in the door. Now, mind you, I will also tell you, it was the hardest studying I've ever done in my life.
I bet. Absolutely.
It was like, what is physics? What's a number? What's an ampere? Tell me what a volt is.
Exactly. Yeah. Hard science stuff. Yes, ma'am.
But it was really interesting. I mean, it was just a really interesting. It was interesting because I'll tell you the advantage to it was when I became a producer in television, it gave me the ability to be able to talk to engineers, and so I learned the language of engineering, and that has always stood me in great stead. I ran a radio station for a while, and to be able to talk to my engineers was really. I mean, first of all, I didn't expect it.
Sure.
But secondly, then I was able to become a different kind of creator, understanding the parameters of the technical side of the creative process, and it was fun.
That's excellent.
It was a lot of fun. Anyhow, Ellen Brown was Jay Leno's director, and did very, very well at it. And I think then she left, and her the woman who followed her was Liz, and Liz came in, and she ended up following her and following Jay to the very end, and. Liz Planka
Yes.
was able to follow it through, and the conversation I had with her was, and there's always a question in my mind about this: why did they take Jay Leno off the air? Not that Jimmy Fallon is not a fantastic show, which it is, but I still can't quite understand logic of taking somebody off the air when they're number one. But anyhow, that's what happened, and it was a great show, and they continue to do it. Now, women in television has changed dramatically in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and you have many, many women that have come up through the ranks of being, assistant, production assistants to writers to producers, and so forth and so on. Now they're directors, and they run the entire shops.
That's excellent.
But
go on.
But generally speaking, it is still unfortunately a man's business. And not unfortunately, but the way that it is.
Well, I would imagine. But I would imagine, as you say, though, it is getting. Would you say it's getting better?
I think it's getting better, but I think it's getting better for anybody who is not. And certainly, please understand that I am not a bra-burning, card-carrying great feminist. I'm a feminist, but one that just believes in opportunities for women based on merit.
Absolutely, yes.
And so what I see in the business up and down the line, including my students, including myself, is I see that people who are not men who are not white men are now getting more opportunities.
Okay.
That reflect the society that creates television. I mean, television has changed, has also morphed. That we have so many different choices. The universe has changed in television. Variety television has changed specifically, and I think that's what we were trying to capture in the book, is how much variety television has changed and how the creators of variety television all look at it differently. And it was fascinating. It was a fascinating opportunity for somebody who is literally a middle class kid from nowhere. And I end up talking to these people, and they ended up talking back to me, which is what I was more shocked with. They actually found the time to talk to me, and it was really something else.
No, honestly, I think you really got an incredible list of recognizable names, in addition to the people that we don't know, but that do produce amazing television. And how do they see the new platforms, the streaming services, YouTube itself, and the opportunities of, beyond those traditional avenues to get on television and stuff? Now, really, an ambitious person really can make their own thing. They do it all the time and post them on YouTube and get these incredible followings, and they're able to create really compelling television.
It depends on how you define television also.
Well, video, I suppose. Go on.
I mean, or an outlet. I mean, the social media, the social media platforms, all of them have opened opportunities. Media is now open to everyone. Everyone who's got a camera, anybody that's got a cell phone. And if you look up and down the line at all of the outlets, everything from news to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitter. I mean, everybody is using all the social media platforms. And now they're all become part and parcel of the universe of entertainment. So that, you do have people that can put a show on And we're not going to talk about the quality of the show, but we're going to put, a show on. And remember, we live in a world of millions of people. You don't need millions of people to get an audience.
Right.
Let's say you get 10,000 people. That's 20,000 or so eyeballs if anybody's blind. But the fact of the matter is, it's an amazing opportunity for anybody that that gets a bug in their ear that they want to go play television. And it's like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. Let's go outside to the back 40 and produce a show.
Absolutely.
Except now you go in your basement and you do it there. I mean, I don't know anybody that's not doing something. It's fun.
Absolutely.
It's fun, exciting, and you get to imitate what you see on the tube.
Well, and today's viral video could be, and again, if it's really a special moment, can be compared to some of these moments of these 90-minute and hour-long variety shows as well. I mean, God, I saw a school band using kind of those grade school kind of musical instruments playing Led Zeppelin. And I forget, I think it was Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page posted it on his Facebook. And it really is the kind of moment that you would see on a variety show maybe decades ago. And it was this great video moment.
Right. No, it was a great. I mean, this is all these great moments, and I'd like to say that you can. And let me tell you something. You can do it too if you want to.
Sure.
So, everybody can put anything they want to with a subscription. And remember, people are getting money from this if they get a big enough audience, and some advertiser will come along and give them money for it.
No question. There might be an opportunity.
There's so many opportunities out there, and the movers and shakers, they're the people, in my opinion, they are the people who set the standard, of course, and they are the people who win the awards. And do I think awards are important? I do think that awards are important. I think that the idea that you put your work out there to be judged by other people is the most important thing. I will never say that in any category of any of these folks that I interviewed, but I've done a good bit of radio and television on the regional level in D.C. and in Western Pennsylvania and the like, on the East Coast specifically. And I will tell you that I send all of my work out, either to be judged or to air on regional PBS or to do local radio or so forth and so on. And it's important that somebody else has judged it. And I look at these folks that I talk to. I don't remember. I guess we really should do a count of how many Emmys are involved with the people, who I interviewed. But I mean, it's got to be into the scores.
Yeah.
You've got the Golden Globes, you've got Oscars, you've got Grammy Awards. You've got all of these awards, and these are important people. The Tony Awards, they're all important.
Agreed.
And these are the folks. These are the folks that you talk about. Usually you don't talk about Mary Beth Lieidman, who put out something on YouTube.
I understand. Yeah. Well, you got some amazing names. I mean, my God, two of the juniors in particular, George Stevens Jr. and Spike Jones Jr. They're I mean, that's certainly famous fathers as well. But these guys are very accomplished as well. And what was it like talking to some of these people?
Talking to them was every single one of them were great. They were great people to talk to. And they, Steve did something I didn't know. He sent out my resume, basically, and I didn't even know this. He said one day, years ago now, he said, send me your resume. I said, okay, I'll send you my resume. So I didn't know this, but he sent this out to all these guys and said, basically just tell them that I wasn't some fly-by-night person. And so I get back this. So I get back this email that Steve sent. He forwards to me, and it was from George Schlatter, and George Schlatter said, "Oh, she's writing a book about us. I don't know why we were not writing a book about her."
Oh, that's really nice. Very cool.
It was so cool, and so I got him to autograph it, of course, and put it on my wall. But talking to George Stevens talking to George Stevens Jr. was really one of the highlights, and talking to Spike was also wonderful. Well, and let me talk about Spike first. He was just a genuinely nice person who had grown up in Hollywood and knew his way around, and was very insightful and very forthcoming on what he thought about variety television and what he did in the business and how it all impacted and everything. And one of the things that I remember about him specifically was literally how open he was and how forthcoming he was with his answers. walking into George Stevens Jr.'s office was literally walking into history. I'm a Washingtonian, so of course the Kennedy Center Honors, which he used to produce,
Yes.
was very high on my list. So you walk into his office, which was at the Kennedy Center, and on one side it was an office that wasn't that wide. It was probably about 18 feet wide, maybe less than that, and it was like 35 feet long. So it was relatively long and narrow. And on one side, it was George Stevens meets Washington. Okay, so you had George Stevens with all these presidents, and George Stevens with all these congressmen, and George Stevens with on Capitol Hill and at the White House. And on the other side, it was George Stevens meets Hollywood, and you had all these pictures of George Stevens with Cary Grant, and George Stevens with his father, and George Stevens doing HUD and Giant, and all of these other movies that they were so important. And so, it was like being a kid in a candy shop. And he was just a gentleman's gentleman. He sat down and he answered all of these questions that we had, and spent a good almost 2 hours with him, maybe a little bit more. Just fascinating. Questions and answers, and fascinating. His take on how everything went together was really memorable. And I hope that people, when they read it, will understand that George Stevens Jr. was in a unique position to be able to look at television and look at the industry. And Spike Jones Jr. was equally, from the West Coast point of view, also equally able to look at all of these people and movers and shakers and what made entertainment in those days. That was neat.
Well, that's the thing. I think, especially those two and their fathers and their contributions to, in Spike Jones' case, recording music and also early radio and television. And then,
Right.
to see the transition into television through their father's eyes. And the same, obviously, with Mr. Stevens. I mean, my God, what an incredible filmmaker his father was. And then George himself to be able to, take some of his father's footage, make those amazing documentaries. And as you say, the work that he did himself in Hollywood and in Washington and everything. So, yeah, they've lived through this evolution of where television began. And I would think the variety show in particular, it was part of the novelty of television, because coming into your home was this, Broadway-style entertainment, but you didn't have to pay a ticket for it. You just plugged it in and turned it on. And, I know your show of shows certainly was competing with the Broadway of its day and certainly scaring the Broadway stages with that kind of quality entertainment every week.
I don't know whether it was scaring it, but certainly bringing these things into everybody's home was magical. But television was magical. I tell my students, I grew up on black and white television, okay? and I tell my students, I get to meet wonderful, wonderful young people on a weekly basis, on a daily basis sometimes. And I keep saying to them, when I used to grow up and watching television, I watched black and white television, but I actually saw it in color. When I looked at a television show like the Lone Ranger, and the Lone Ranger was outside, I didn't see gray as the sky. I saw it as blue.
Interesting.
And the same thing, and you talk to these kids about black and white television, and they look at you with as though you are really from another planet, and you should have been put out of your misery quite a long time ago. But it's a different world. It's a different media, and that's why variety television has morphed so much. And I think that if you when you read the book and you read these different people's answers, you asked the question before about technology and about how it's all morphed. Well, it really depends on the person. It depends on whether or not they see television as something that is going to be is self-contained, or whether it's something that it's not. I mean, when Steve did his shows, when he did the comeback special, if you look at the comeback special, what you see magically beautiful lighting and just the ability to be able to capture the essence of the people who are involved, namely Elvis. And it's a magical show, which is why it stood the test of time. And you look at a lot of the other shows that these other folks did, and they're just really wonderful shows. But on the other hand, you look at the more up-to-date shows like Glenn Weiss, who does the Tony Awards every year, and he and now his partner now doing the Kennedy Center Honors, and you look at Louis J. Hurwitz and what he does with the Oscars, and these shows are all modern shows now. They are shows that are paced differently. These are shows that are trying to capture a different audience, and but they're using the same tools that they had, which is why we love them, and it's one of the reasons we will continue to look at them all the time.
I really love, though, in that period, especially during the 60s and 70s, when videotape was new and there really was a lot of conceptual creativity beyond the staging and lighting of a stage performance of a song or a choreographed dance. I mean, that 68 comeback special, Steve was talking about the, just that great impromptu session that he has with his old musicians, Elvis, and around the live audience, and that great moment where Elvis really does seem comfortable recapturing the 50s Elvis in that 68 special. But really some of those other, the karate segment and am I right, was Guitar Man part of that 68 comeback special too?
I think it might have been.
Okay, but yeah, that's the thing that, like, there really was, we all lived through that, music video period of MTV where beyond, singing, there was a story behind the videos and stuff. But you got, all those came from, obviously, the variety television directors and producers that wanted to do something more than just have, the singer on the stage singing with a great orchestra.
Well, the most fun, of that was the idea of being able to, to talk to these guys because they were there. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of stuff we couldn't put in the book. There's a lot of material that was says, "Can I tell you this off the record?" And I said, "Well, sure you can." And, of course, those are the stories that you want to tell people. You're not going to, but their insights into the personalities involved and the people involved and the talent involved and their collegiality with each other, it just is really amazing. I mean, there's a fellow, I'm sure that you, as you read the book, you read about Dwight Hammond. I mean, Dwight Hammond was just this giant in the world of variety television, and 80% of these folks learned something from Dwight Hammond because he was such an artist when it came to creating television and capturing it. But the biggest thing that all of them will say is, look, I remember Louis J. Hurwitz saying, look, it used to be we'd get 2 and 3 and 4 weeks to be able to create a television show. Now we've got 5 days. We've got 5 days because of the expense. Yeah. And it's the time element that how do you create something of that level? And they do it all the time, these fellows and women. And how do you do it day after day and still hold on to the quality of the show? And that seems to me to be what the part and parcel of what they're doing is. And it is the technology. I mean, it's being able to take a camera out. I believe it was Dennis Rosenblatt takes a camera out and shoots all over the world. And he comes back and he puts together these shows. There's no other word to say it besides it's just really neat.
Sure.
And in every sense of the word, they just do something that we mere mortals can't do. And I think that from a creative point of view, a creativity point of view, being able to capture some of their ideas was what made the book morph from being just a history of television, a history of variety television, into what makes television tick. What is it about it that gives people different vision? I mean, it started morphing for me when I realized that they all had different definitions of everything. And I thought to myself, there's no way that you can capture this unless you just let them tell their own stories and try to organize the material. Should it be lighting? Should it be camera? Is it the talent? Is it the writing? Is it the comedy? I mean, Steve will always say that the number one reason that he's as great as he is because of his crews. And he'll talk more about his crews and the fact that he had the best crews ever worked for him at all the time he was working. And other people will talk about their camera people. And it just goes on and on and on as to, how to define it. The question that we ask is define variety television. And that in itself is interesting because what it shows the breadth and depth of the folks that were involved and how passionate they were and how their visions are all different. And that's what makes TV special. That's what makes variety television special. And that's what makes it fun. You know, I mean, we don't watch television because we want to learn about amoebas. We watch television. We watch television because we want to be engaged.
Absolutely.
We want to be entertained. And variety television, in all of its different iterations, it continues to be fun and to entertain and to engage. And that's really where it is.
It's funny because you would think, some people say, variety TV is dead, or Martin Short and now I'm blanking the other woman from Saturday Night Live that he's doing the current NBC show, and it's sketch comedy and it's sort of variety, but really the late night shows are really variety shows. They aren't the talk shows that Dick Cavett was or Parr, when they started back in those days. And they had, occasional musical acts, but it really was a straight up interview show. And I would even almost argue now that really all three major networks, they really are doing late night variety in their talk shows.
Well, and that's your definition.
Sure.
Okay,
fair enough. Absolutely.
that's your definition, and a lot of people would argue against that. I mean, there's when you read the book, and I'm talking to your audience right now, but when they read the book, they'll understand. It really depends on your definition of how you're defining variety.
Okay.
And one gentleman in particular, a fellow by the name of Don Misher, Don Misher Productions. Mr. Misher said, everybody can create variety television right now by going to YouTube and choosing what you want to watch. And I have a difference of opinion with my co-author on this, but I think that there's a lot of truth in that. That you can create your own variety television. It's not variety television the way that many people would conceptualize it, but Carol Burnett's in reruns right now.
Sure.
And you've got Martin Short and Maya Rudolph.
Yes.
Trying to do this show on NBC with mixed results.
Yes.
And it's as I watch that show, I'd like to change it. But of course, I wouldn't tell them that, because now, of course, for one brief moment in my life, I'm the expert on something. So,
that's awesome.
Because I've talked to more people than even they've talked to. So,
can you imagine though? Can you imagine if shows like Carol Burnett had the advantages of social media, and a thing like that classic Gone with the Wind parody would immediately be shared the next day, the way that a really good moment on a Jimmy Kimmel show or on the Maya Rudolph Martin Short show are shared the way they are today.
It's good and bad, because then you get into who owns the intellectual property. I mean, I know that's a really far reach for all of this, but when somebody steals something off of a show that's not copyrighted and puts it on YouTube, it's on there for 2 days and it's pulled off. I mean, this happened in 2000. We're in 2016, 2012, the London Olympics. Okay,
yes.
It was the opening of the London Olympics with 007
yes.
Parachuting in with the Queen. It was a classic moment of television. It was just a great moment of television. It went instantly to YouTube, and within a day and a half, it was instantly pulled off of YouTube.
Oh, that's interesting. I would assume that, because like a lot of those Maya Rudolph, Martin Short things, those are put out by NBC or
that's right,
other shows. Go on.
They're put out by NBC.
But the Olympics didn't want that out there.
Well, I think it might have been the Queen that didn't want it out there, but who knows? I don't know her very well. I'd only like to meet her, soon. That's my next life. But no, I mean, it was taken off almost immediately. It was out there for like 24 hours, and then they pulled it off again.
Wow. No, I didn't remember that. That's really interesting. Well, again, this is the changing world we're in, and that's why it's like, I agree. If it's I mean, I've got my own, intellectual property that I try to protect and everything. But yeah, I mean,
and you can't do
right,
it.
Right. No, it's really hard.
You can't do it. I mean, you can't do it. The intellectual property is the name of the game, and you put out something like the Maya and Martin show, and you can's do it. Somebody's going to steal whatever they want.
Wow. No, it's good food for thought. Well, seriously, congratulations on this amazing list of producers and directors that you did get to talk to. I mean, you've mentioned some of these names like Michener and George Schlatter and Lorne Michaels, of course. Was that a tough get, Lorne Michaels?
Yes.
Okay. I can tell for the hesitation. Go on. Or as little as you want.
It was the final piece.
Okay.
And it took a long time to do it. And because I am a woman of good breeding, I will not go into how difficult it was to get to talk to Mr. Michaels.
Well, I'm glad you're able to get it, though. Go on.
I will also say that he was really very nice when I talked to him. And he was really very forthcoming in the time that he gave. He was the only one of the movers and shakers that I did not get to talk to in person. I talked to on the phone.
I see.
But everybody else I spoke to in person, and I've got videotape and audio tape. But he did take the time to do it, and his answers were, as you will see in the book, very interesting. And he's a very interesting guy. I mean, he's the king of television right now.
No question. Well,
he is.
And then even prior to Saturday Night Live came from, from Canada in their variety television world, and doing not only producing and directing, but obviously performing as well in Canada. Then those Lily Tomlin specials of the early 70s leading up to Saturday Night Live. And as you say now, no, he is the king of television. All the programs that he controls. That's.
But he worked for George Schlatter.
Yes, I do. Yes, and I'm sure that's in the book. Yeah.
And the fact I can't imagine being in those days. I also can't imagine being in the world of Sid Caesar. These are geniuses. These are people that are just completely, unencumbered by the pull of the earth, and they just really let their imagination go, and they came up with a template that works. How does the template of Saturday Night Live work? Because it worked over and over and over again. And how did Schlatter work? George Schlatter put together a show that was, in its time, just ultimately one of the most amusing shows ever.
Sure.
Tommy Smothers also, the Smothers Brothers.
Absolutely.
They were just simply wonderful shows, and people watched them for that reason.
I remember my parents. I was very little, but we watched the Smothers Brothers. We watched Laugh-In, and they were, they were that cocktail generation. My parents, the Rat Pack kind of generation, not the rock and roll generation. So
it was just great fun.
Yes.
And the best thing, one of the things I've suggested with Fade Up is that people look at YouTube. Have YouTube going at the same time they're reading the book. Because a lot of the different pieces are out on YouTube now.
Yes.
And with the blessings of the creators, and so you can look at see some of the creations of Dwight Hammond and Gary Smith. You can see pieces that were done of Barbra Streisand back in those days. You can look and see some of the pieces of Laugh-In. You can look at your show of shows. A lot of this work is all on YouTube. And it's so interesting to look at it because, first of all, a lot of these people are either older or else, unfortunately, they passed away. And their work is wonderful. And you then look at the work today and you see the roots of television today.
Yes.
What are we trying to measure up to today? We're trying to measure up to the excellence that was established, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And, goodness knows I'm still struggling. I don't know about you.
Well, I'm totally still struggling. I hear you.
I'm still looking for the magic bullet that, will make me a household name like all these guys are household names. But instead I hooked my wagon to Steve Binder's star, and he was kind enough to take me along for the ride. And I will forever be grateful to him for this opportunity.
No, I think it's a wonderful collaboration, and really the book is exciting. You say you did video interviews as well. Would you try to put together some sort of video presentation of these interviews? I would imagine to get clips, that the clearance to get some of these clips would really be a hell of a challenge as well.
Are you asking me about whether or not I put clips together of the interviews?
Well, obviously. You could use photographs, but making a television show of your interviews, and I don't know how easy that would be because then you might want to be able to show as many clips as you can, and that might be a challenge. The
answer is I don't know.
Okay.
It certainly. Let me put it to you this way: it hasn't not crossed my mind.
Sure. Well, you're from broadcasting. I would think it. Of course
exactly. I'm really sitting on a treasure trove. I think that ultimately it will end up, in a USC library. The information is great, but a lot of it would need to be edited down. I mean, a lot of it was off the record, and I respected that completely.
Okay.
I mean, these men and women trusted me enough because of Steve to open up to me and to talk relatively honestly with me about what they did in television, and they talked about the personalities involved. And the insight that it gave me is something that, excuse the expression, but I will probably take it to the grave with me. We don't want to. We want to make sure that everybody gets their due, but that there are gems in there, and also just listening to them. The Television Academy has a bunch of interviews with these folks, but they're different interviews. I've looked at a lot of them. The interviews that they have with them have a different timbre to them than the ones that we did. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's going to be a great comparison because I was going to bring up the Television Academy oral history interviews, and that's a great point. You can get Fade Up and really compare the stories and stuff. That's terrific. No, honestly, I've enjoyed the book, and it was great talking to Stephen. It's wonderful talking to you. I congratulate you on this. I hope you guys are touring around at least to schools to talk about this beyond your locations in D.C. and in L.A., but I don't know what the plan is.
The answer is, this whole thing has been such a surprise to me. I'll tell you in about a year where we've been, and we'll see what happens. Steve, of course, has plans for a second book that he'd like to do. We'll see we'll see when that happens. But he would like to do now a similar book on sitcoms.
Oh, and fantastic!
That could be really interesting. For me, of course, it would be another OMG moment that I would sit down and talk to everyone and get I figure I've had about a half an hour of fame right now. Now I'm going to go for the hour.
Atta girl.
So I can get some commercials for it. But beyond that, everything is as it is. I wish I had, I wish I could say I created variety television, but I haven't. All I've been able to do is report on it.
And I documented it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've had the opportunity to talk to the people that made it. I didn't mean to step on you there, but it's wonderful. The book is called Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television. It's published by Kendall Hunt and co-written by Steve Minder and our current guest, Mary Beth Lieidman. I really appreciate this, and good luck with the book. I really think it's a great document that really marks the trailblazers and the innovators of yesterday and today that make variety television as compelling as it is. So congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, and I hope that the readers find it just a really great read. I think it is just a great read. It's fun to read it. It's interesting. It's thought-provoking, but mostly it's just plain engaging. And I hope that people find it as much fun to read as we had writing it.
That's Mary Beth Lieidman, co-author of Fade Up, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television, a very cool book that deserves your attention. I hope you do check it out. And thanks to Mary Beth for talking to us today. If you're thinking about buying the book, maybe you could purchase it at Amazon and do that through the Word Balloon portal, and that way we get a little kickback for that. Something to consider. But I hope you enjoyed today's conversation on Word Balloon. Still have a lot of San Diego Comic-Con material to present to you in the days ahead. I still got my two panels with Sal Abenati about buying original comic book art, and certainly with Hollywood storyboard artist and comic book artist Trevor Goring talking about the early history of comic book and comic strip films. Great panel that we did at San Diego Comic-Con. So those and lots more coming up in the days ahead here at Word Balloon. Keep listening and looking for the new posts. Thanks again for listening today. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your continued support as well. Questions or comments about the show, you can reach me via email, john@wordballoon.com, or you can talk to me via Facebook, my name, John Suntress, or on Twitter, my handle is @JohnWordBalloon. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. More great conversations coming in the days ahead. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2016.